so many battles, ups and downs, and we still stand. We still here. But you know, Mike gave me the mic, and he said, "David, open up." But you know, those who may know me may not know me. I operate on divine inspiration. You know what I do is true by divine. I am a murderer. There's so many different ways. But since we found it now, I'm black, black. By the way, I had the newspapers back there. I published. I'm a firm my prison. I am a publisher. And I've been publishing for almost 40 years. And it was real good to me that was on the rise. See, they started a paper. I used to do a publication called The Informer. And so after prayer, because I said I would never do that again, but here I am. And since that time, that publication that me and Bill published is the #1 black circulated newspaper in the nation. Started right here in Baltimore. And that's just one of the stories that came out. You just mentioned Dr. Buckley. He went on and started We Are Us program. Then there's a brother, Rennie Bass, who have a program called Kyoga. These brothers buy real estate collectively. And then you put it back out there on the market. But what they're doing, they're keeping that money circulating among themselves. And Michael Johnson, who has been, my goodness, he's been there and done everything pretty much. Oh. Movie theater, TV shows, teaching, everything.
I'm wanted in 29 states.
But you know, man, it's been such a tremendous ride. I've met so many great and wonderful people through this organization. Pretty much a third of the newspaper in there are people from that I met through this breakfast. And before I bring up Dr. Slade, I want to share this with you because, like I said, I operate on divine inspiration. And recently, you know, I'm 73. I started this thing when I was 33 on my mission. And remind me of the story of Moses. They say, this is what I heard, that he went around this mountain for 40 years. So have I. But he was supposed to want the land of milk and honey, but he died before he could do that. But guess what? I entered in. That's the contract. And the reason being is because recently, I was going around pretty much doing the same thing. So I do so much stuff. I was so busy in the laboratory, but I should have been out there in the field. You know, because like I say, sometimes I don't care how old you are, there's little stumbling blocks that you may need to overcome. And one of the things I did, see, like I said, I've been public for 40 years. I help people become quite wealthy through my promotion. I assisted them. I help people who enter into power, help them to get elected. I help what you call cultural individuals get noticed. And I did a lot of things over here. And like I said, I'm one of the most blessed men on this earth. Because I met so many people now. I know people, I'm meeting people all around the world now. I'm invited to Africa, England, Panama, all over the United States now. Little old Dave Murphy, you knew my story, that's why I said this is miraculous. But what just happened recently, when I say enter into the land of milk and honey, there was one thing that perplexed me all these years. I was able to do that for so many, but for some reason I could not do it for myself, financially. And that bothered me. I question everything about me. I examine myself constantly because I consider myself, this is what I deem myself, I call myself a servant of servants. See, what I do best is serve people who actually serve people. And you know, and it's a saying, sometimes a doctor needs a doctor, a lawyer needs a lawyer once in a while. So recently, because I'm getting tired, I'm getting old, I said, I'm tired of this vicious cycle. So I went to some local brothers who are very successful in their businesses. But each one is about 4 of them I went to. I'm not going to call their names out. But all of them were strong in their faith. And I went to them because I don't consider business as business. I used to call it a ministry. my way of paying something forward. And I told him, I said, how can I help so many people? And I said, but I have a difficult time separating business from ministry. Each one of them brothers told me in their own in a particular way that your business is your ministry and your ministry is your business. So you cannot separate. But then the brothers went on to say, because they know that we've met it over the years. They said one thing that they had to overcome, and I don't get to overcome yet, but I'm getting there. You cannot, much as you love people, I love my people. I would have never done, I could have lived happily ever after if I just looked at me. But you know, dealing with you guys not easy. I'll tell you the truth. But the thing is, I try to carry, you know, my back is not that strong. I try to carry so many people, and it just kept me stuck. And just recently, it finally dawned on me. This land I call milk and honey. You know, for the first time in my life, with much prayer, like I said, I promoted so many people, so many, you know, programs and everything. But there's one person I never promoted. That was David Murphy. Wow. You see, I was the one that God cleaned up. Not the National Black Unity League, not Black Men Unifying Black Men. They are attributes of what I do. And so my message is to you this morning. And it's not selfish, it's not bragging, it's not boasting. See, we have to take these bushels off our head and let our light shine. See, if God cleaned you up, He put you out there. And we got to stop hiding behind our products, goods, and services. Show who you are, because I'm going to tell you, I'm in media. We own less than 1% of the media, Black people. I'm television, newspaper, podcast, lump them all together, less than 1%. And out of that 1%, 90% of the Black media is kept by corporate America. When I say kept, that means they better not say certain things about them, or they're going to lose their funding. So they're quiet. But one thing about the National, we independent. We are what you call a collaboration. The people involved with this publication not only put up their resources, but they put up their finances as well. And that's why we're so well received, because it's a solution-oriented publication. But the thing I'm trying to say to you is this. Our people, our young people, as well as you, are on the internet all the time. You're on your cell phones. You're being bombarded with all types of messages, subliminal messages. Propaganda being used on us constantly. But you know, our young folks, what they're seeing in the media is entertainers, athletes. They're up here one day, now they're down in the gutter, and that's what media does. And I can tell you, you can look at Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson, Clarence Thomas, you know, if you was a little Caucasian lady sitting in your little secluded area. And this is what they thinking. I don't care how much them Negroes can sing, dance, or play football. They not and that's why they think about us this type of way. But that's what they see. But the truth is, we, Black melanated people, is one of the most powerful people we are the most powerful people on the surface. We have built this nation, we have built this whole society. And I'm gonna tell you why. You know, recently, about 6 years ago, I'm gonna get off here, Mike. Okay, then. You gave me the mic, Mike. But in any case, I was invited to this, what you call us, Asian Association out in Woodlawn. It wasn't just a Korean, they was all type of Asian, Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese, all types of them next week. And they asked me, we would like to put together a Black directory. They said, no special space, we take care of you, we take care of you. And of course, my antenna went up for a Black directory. One of those Asian gentlemen stood up and he said, first of all, he looked around the room like I'm looking at you. He said, first of all, we don't get along with one another. He said, Japanese don't support Chinese business. Koreans don't support Vietnamese business. They support their own. But they don't cross-reference. They go to their own. He also went on to say this. He said, we, Black melanated people, are the most unified people in the world. He said, the only problem is y'all just don't even know it. Why do you think they come from all over the world, sit up shop in the hood, and make a fortune off the least of us. Because even the least of us, we are spending power. But I'm going to close with this about you. This is my message to you. In every paper since I started, dealing with Martin Luther King, it always said that on the headline, we are keeping the dream alive. Right. And that's what I've been doing ever since I've been on this journey. Because I stand on great shoulders. All of the Malcolm X's, the Marcus Garvey's, all that, I should stand on that. Just the baton has been passed to us. And so do you. And maybe, just maybe one day people will be standing on ours. That's why it's so important to let your light shine. Our children need to see the real deal. Real people putting in real work. See, they get being bamboozled by the mass media. And so this is how God revealed to me, David, let your light shine. You go out into the world. Let people see the real deal. Aches, pains, ups and downs, the ins and outs. But one thing for real, for sure, we are real. And so with that being said, I want to thank you again for coming out to this breakfast. Because you don't know how invaluable this is to us. Because everyone, like I say, that I know personally, like Bill did, when he had an idea, but God inspired him to do Black men, Unifying Black men. We never knew where it was going to go to. But like I said, we did so many great and wonderful things. Met so many great and wonderful people over the years. And the same thing with you. You have so much power with your thoughts and your ideas. But again, let your light shine. Because when I talk to most of the people that I know in their person, when they tell me their story, see, all you see is the surface of what they do. But what we don't know is who they are, who we are. And that's why it's so important. My children need to see you, not the stuff they see on the media. My children need to see real folks like you guys. But in any case, before I go, this is very important. We don't charge people special occasions when we have this breakfast. Usually it's free because we want everybody to come, especially our young Black men. But you know, even freedom comes with a price. And we do accept donations because we have a Black catering. We always try to put our events at a Black facility or a Black location. We've been true to their cause. But if you can give, if you're able to give, support us because this money, that food didn't come free. So we have to take care of that caterer. And again, I want to thank you, Dr. Slayton, excuse me. Welcome to the breakfast, sir. And we want to thank you for showing up for us and allow us to be in this facility, sir. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. You asked the preacher, I can help you raise the money. Honored that you all host this event here. I have been to a couple of events over the last 72 hours. I tell folks all the time, I love Kwanzaa, I love Easter, I love 4th of July. King Weekend is my favorite holiday because it is honoring someone that birthed all of sort of what we are. And so as I look around and I see the faces, I recognize I'm here because of Doc's shoulders. Denise's, Diane Bell through ABC. One of my first employees when I moved here, Brother Johnson. And it's because folks have invested in me. So I welcome you in that space, but I think it's significant to recognize the power of Black men within the context of my own Christian faith. Yes. No disrespect to my brothers who are Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist. But there's a story in the book that sort of governs my faith. Tells the story of this young boy that's being born, and a policymaker has an issue with his birth. And so, through a dream, this young boy's parents are told to take him to Egypt to hide. You've probably heard of this story. And some folks will argue with me, Doc, when I try and share this story in this vein. The reason I say he was sent there to hide is because I can no more separate Egypt from Africa than I can Baltimore from Maryland. All right. So when I read that story and it says, take this boy and hide him in Africa, because the king has now created an edict, which is known as public policy, that says kill all the boys that look like him in a certain area. I recognize the power of Black men, even from my own faith tradition. because the subtext of the story simply says this. Of course, his father was supposed to go out of his way to protect his future. But if you read the subtleties of the story, that wasn't even his daddy. The responsibility has always been on black men to go out of their way to protect the futures of hope yet unborn.
Yes.
And that's what I see guys like this for, is for us to come together, encourage one another, and say there is power in unity. There's power in coming together. And so I'm so glad that you chose to come to this place on my favorite holiday weekend where we honor one of the greatest persons to ever walk the earth, Dr. Martin Luther King. If you are so inclined, before you leave, I want to read something really, really brief, really, really brief. And it simply says, if I can find it. If there were no African-American preacher, I would argue there would be no African-American culture in existence today. For out of the hulls of slave ships emerged a voice necessary for the salvation of enslaved men and women. The voice and presence of this hope whisperer was essential to the success of a disinherited and dislocated race of people. Upon their arrival on Strange Soul loomed the question for them all: how will we survive in this strange land? Since that dreadful day in 1619 in Jamestown to present day, the African American has had to wrestle with the question posed by the mystic writer Howard Thurman. Under what terms is survival possible? Therefore, the first Africans brought to this soil were given very little in the way of survival kits. They were in danger of death from the start, and it was their responsibility to be a quick study and learn the ways of those who held death over their heads. The possibility of death due to sickness was always a reality. The savage reality of rape was close to every human shackle, and the possibility of suicide was always a present option. The only way survival would be possible is that there must have been a God somewhere. Someone had to rise up and lead the hopeless and fearful people that had been literally snatched from their homeland. Someone would have to reestablish the hope of survival while calming the anxieties of imminent torture. Someone had to say a word in those dark days of uncertainty. It is out of this deplorable time in history that a voice, unlike any other of its day, would emerge. A voice shackled in the chains of slavery and liberated by the belief that there was a God above all the earth who loved justice and would carry their burdens. Amid the savage entanglement of this voice would need a home for its fine-tuning and message deliverance. Religion was to provide the platform and the base for the voice to develop and manifest its calling. Religion became the demarcation line for what is presumed available to the oppressed. But this religion known as Christianity was also draped in the teachings and exploitations of evil men of European descent, men whose sole desire is to acquire wealth and power through the exploitation of fellow human beings. Thus, the God of the religion, introduced to the enslaved, is imagined as an elderly, benign white man seated on a white throne with bright white light emanating from his countenance. His angels are depicted as being of the white race with wings, while the antagonist, Satan, is cast as a dark, devilish sort. Closing, I say this: the backdrop is the milieu from which the voice must craft his words wisely. He must hone the skill of navigating double consciousness in a clandestine oratory fashion that masks the disdain of royal consciousness that has gone mad. This voice must adapt the craftiness of political correctness in an era of political distrust while sounding the trumpet of freedom. As a result, his or her entry into the political fray is inescapable. And if he is to see his people free, the Black preacher is now and forever will be a political figure to deal with in these here United States of America. On this day, on this weekend, we thank God for the political preaching that emerged through Dr. Martin Luther King. We welcome you all here on this day. All right. I'm going to close my prayer in recognition of Jesus Christ, which is part of my Protestant faith, no disregard to those who practice other faith traditions. And when we close, I encourage you to acknowledge the deity in which you practice your faith. Amen? Amen. Amen. Dear God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the minds and the spirits that have come together to create this day, this event, this body of gathering of men and women seeking and desiring to lift their people. We pray that you would bless them as they move forward over the year in the different endeavors that they engage, that the work of their hands and their hearts might benefit greatly our community to take us to a much higher height. And so now, Lord, we ask that you might bless this food that has been prepared, that it might nourish us, that it might sustain us in the days and hours to come. We thank you that it is available to us, and we don't take it for granted. So it's in the name of Jesus that I pray. Amen.
Amen. I want to let everyone know right now that the buffet is open, and them two young men back there, that's Noah. Raise your hand, Noah. Noah, raise your hand. Caleb, raise your hand. Those are my grandsons, and they should be able to take care of you. If they don't, I will hit them in the chest. So, but they'll take care of you. Please, just go and serve yourself as you wish. It's chicken salad, tuna salad, fruit salad, and stuff. And when we finish, we'll continue on with the program. And for those who want to do Cash App, too, it's $ NWHS 74. Cash App is $ NWHS 74. And if you need it, I just don't give it in the intro. Please go and let's go. We good?
All right, we're gonna be on for a couple more minutes, y'all. Hope you all we're gonna take a little food break. It's meal time, so just wanted to come on and give a commercial. So we are doing the Freedom Rides again, coming up this year. So definitely look it up. We'll be leaving on the April the 12th. That's a Saturday morning, coming back maybe the 16th or the 16th or 16th. I'm sorry. Yes, so dates have changed, but definitely as well. But next week, my birthday will be at TNET, so just want to give a heads up for that. So I was asked to do this. Shout out to Brother Bill Gooden. Who may be watching. Definitely. Oh boy, hold on. Let me go back with this. Good to see you, my brother. Yeah, pleasure. All right. Hey, no. So you on the Owens Mills side, or you over?
No, I'm in Dundalk.
Okay. No, because that's what a sister. She's running for city council in Sharonda Huffman. She's more Middle River, Essex.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll definitely connect you with her.
Yeah, it's good to know.
Yeah. I'll definitely connect.
I like to formulate a group on that side.
Right. No, that's what I remember. That's what I'm referring. So.
Definitely want to hook up with you.
Yeah. All right. Definitely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. She's Sharonda Huffman. Right. I'll text her too.
You went to the red carpet event?
I did. Yeah. It was nice. Yeah. It was. Yeah. There was. Well, I thought when they say rush to the hospital, I just assumed ambulance, but someone took them. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me put this down.
I know, right?
This one here.
Got it?
Okay. No, that's what the purpose is.
How are you?
Mayor called me.
time. And I of us in polls. And the album was Dr. King's speeches. And she would play it over and over again, and I would listen to it every day. And I didn't realize until I got to college that I had memorized at least one of the speeches. And so I thank my mom for that. And so Dr. King he was a handsome man. There are pictures of him on the table. He was a humble man. He was a leader. You know, he traveled. He traveled a lot. He earned the Nobel Peace Prize, if you remember, and he spoke out. But today we tend to see him as a superhero, someone who's kind of like a fiction-like character, and that's not who he was. And I was just listening to Mike, and I want to thank you, Mike, and I also want to thank Bill Good. I was called to a little church down in Montgomery, Alabama. And I started preaching there. Things were going well in that church. It was a marvelous experience. And one day, a year later, a lady by the name of Rosa Parks decided that she wasn't going to take it any longer. She stayed in a bus seat. And you may not remember it now, as a ways back several years. But it was the beginning of a movement where 350,000 Black men and women refused absolutely to ride the city buses, and we walked together for 381 days. You see, that's what we got to learn in the North. Negroes got to learn to stick together. We stuck together. And when we sent out the call, no Negro rode the city buses. It was one of the most amazing things that I'd ever seen in my life. So as the people of Montgomery called me and asked me to serve as their spokesman, and as the president of the new organization, the Montgomery Improvement Association, that came into being, I couldn't say no. We started our struggles together. And things were going well for the first few days, but then about 10 or 15 days later, when the white people of Montgomery knew that we meant business, they started doing some nasty things. They started making nasty telephone calls, and some days more than 40 telephone calls would come in threatening my life, the life of my family, and the life of my children. Now, I took it for a while in a strong manner, but I never will forget one night. It was around midnight, and you can have some strange experiences at midnight. I came in at the meeting all day with the steering committee. My wife was in the bed, and I immediately took off my clothes to get in the bed to try to get some rest, to get up early the next day to try to keep things going. But immediately, the telephone rang. And I picked it up, and on the other end was an ugly voice. That voice said to me in substance, nigga, we're tired of you and your mess now. And if you aren't out of this town in 3 days, we're going to blow up your house and blow your brains out. Now, I'd heard these things before, but for some reason it got to me that night I was weak. I got up and I went back to the kitchen and tried to warm some coffee, thinking that coffee would provide me a little relief. I sat at that table and I thought about many things. I tried to pull back on the philosophies and the theologies that I just studied in the university. I tried to come up with philosophical and theological reasons for the existence and the realities of sin and evil. But the answer didn't quite come there. Sat there and I thought about my beautiful little daughter who was over there asleep. She was the darling of my life, and I come in night after night and see that little gentle smile. I sat at that table and I thought about that little girl, thinking that she could be taken away from me at any moment now. I sat there and thought about my beautiful, dedicated, and devoted wife who was over there asleep. She could be taken from me, and I could be taken from her, and it got to the point where I just couldn't take it any longer. Something told me, you can't call on Daddy. He's up in Atlanta more than 175 miles away. You can't even call on Mama now. You got to call on that something and that power that can make a way out of no way. I leaned over that cup of coffee and I said a prayer. I prayed out loud. I prayed out loud that night. I said, Lord, I'm down here trying to do what's right. I think I'm right, and I think the cause that we represent is right. But Lord, I must admit that I'm weak. I'm faltering. I'm losing my way. It's at that moment I realized that I had to get to know religion and I had to get to know God for myself. Said a prayer and I prayed out loud. I said, Lord, help me. At that moment, I could hear a little voice saying, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Martin Luther, stand up for truth. Stand up for justice. And Lord, I will be with you even until the end of times. I tell you, I saw the lightning flash. I felt the thunder roar. I felt sin breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus saying still to fight on. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me, never to leave me alone. No, never alone. No, never alone. He promised never to leave me alone. Sometimes I feel discouraged. And I don't mind telling you this morning that sometimes I feel discouraged. I felt discouraged in Chicago. And as I move through Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, I feel discouraged sometimes. Yes, I feel discouraged and I feel my life's works in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There's a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There's a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. God bless you.
Thank you. Let's give him another round of applause.
conversation. I mean, you know, and I always encourage young people, my grandsons and all, to go back and to listen to the speech. You know, don't let someone think that only I Have a Dream is the only speech that he had. And of course, the day before, on February the 3rd, excuse me, on April the 3rd, the day before, there was the great speech that he gave in the church. You know, I've been blessed over the years to be around a lot of interesting Black men. Besides my daddy. Most of you know that's been knowing me for a while. I'm the youngest of 11. 4 sisters and then 7 boys. And so I know how my mother was. I always imagine when I see young girls now with 2 kids or something like that, or I saw my daughter with my 2 grandkids when they were little, but I couldn't imagine my mother. But one thing that my mother always was is that she was a praying woman. And she knew it was going to be tough with boys, raising Black boys in the 60s, you know, who were pretty intelligent in their own right. Who was going to stand up and fight for what's right. And all of my life, I've been fortunate that I've seen the Reverend Baskins. I've seen the Reverend Dobson. I've seen the Reverend Phillips. You know, people that kind of kept me out of trouble a little bit. But at the end of the day, the thing that I recognize is I started paying attention. And my daddy would always say that the same way that a man acts on Monday is the same way a man should act on Sunday. There was no separation. And my daddy, who was a praying man, Monumental Baptist Church, my mother went to Greater Gethsemane. They stayed married for 70 years. And my mother said the reason she stayed so married so long to my father is they went to 2 different churches. So, and I believe that too. I believe that too. But then you get an opportunity as you get older, you meet new people who are new ministers, new folks who have got new ways to do things. Some I've enjoyed, some I can't. But then there these 2 that are here today. I've watched them more than I've been around them. I've heard them more than I've been around them. But I've always appreciated that they always give back. Not give back to the car dealer to buy the big car. Not give back to the big house and remove themselves out of the community. Not talk about how much of the watch is costing and the jewelry is costing, because that's happening in some of the places. But I remember what Pastor Slayton always said to me, he said, Mike, all church ain't church. And all pastors ain't pastors. But I am so blessed that for this 6th annual Dr. Martin Luther King session that we're having today, that taught yearly, I didn't mess it up that time though. I mean, I had him on a TV show. I just butchered his name the whole show. But that he's here because he also comes into a church that kind of raised me too, you know, because men were coming out of that church. Ministers are coming out of that church. They wouldn't see a white folk, you know, and they didn't necessarily want to have to be around them. They didn't have no problem being with Black folks. And we know we've got some difficult times ahead. We've always did. We've had it for over 400 years. So the times that these next 4 years are going to bring to you, please don't be scared. Please don't even let it take that much space in your head. Do your thing. And let's get an opportunity and applaud for Reverend Tard S. Yearly Esquire. Not only a preacher, but a preacher and a lawyer.
Good afternoon now. You know, when you have friends in the audience, they tend to send you messages while you're kind of gathering your thoughts. So I got an interesting text a minute ago. It said, I know you pretty good, but how you gonna follow Dr. King? That's a serious question.
Yeah.
It really is. To Michael Eugene Johnson, thank you for our emerging and budding friendship, for your commitment and passion for our community. To Dr. Slayton, who has opened the doors of this house as an extension of how he opens his heart to the concerns of all of us. How it is probably one of the most tremendous honors that I will ever have to be able to say that it was I who ordained you, that I didn't have to kill you along the way. Dr. Slayton is very intense, but that intensity is important for all of us. To all of you, many of you are friends in this room. I won't get too far down the road calling names. The joke I tell now, folks come up and say, well, you know, we see all your wife posts about the boys, and we have young children. Joshua just turned 11, and Jordan will be 13 in April. But we have young children, they have old parents. And so the older I get, the more I realize that some things I just don't remember like I once did. Names. How many of you have this habit that when you're trying to remember a name, you're drawn back to saying your ABCs in your head, hoping that some letter will trigger something that will cause you to remember who you're talking to? Otherwise, we resort to that good old standby, hey, baby. So if I look at you with a curious look and you know we know each other, just understand I'm having a moment and I'm saying my ABCs in my head. Just give me a few moments. I've been traveling all week, and this is the third, I think, in a series of conversations like these that I've been having. On Monday in Birmingham, meeting with the leadership of the National Baptist Convention, which, if you know Black church history, is often held up in a very complicated sort of way because there was resistance to Dr. King's efforts to advance nonviolent social change, at least in terms of the way the argument's been scripted. And so Dr. King left with some preachers who formed what is now known as the Progressive National Baptist Convention. Then I spent another conversation with a group of clergy who were really wrestling with the reality that the 45th president is about to come back. And in many ways, we are less prepared this time than we were the first time. And so here we are. We now have less than 48 hours before there will be a new president. A new president who comes to take us back to the good old days of an old America. An America that is committed to and invested in raising the banner of a curious brand of whiteness that suits certain needs and interests. In many ways, as I've thought about it, is mentioned standing on the shoulders, literally, of a Marion Bascom, whom for the early years of my pastorate at Douglas, I was able to stick close to him. Those who had ever been around us would know that I never called him by his government name. I called him Granddaddy. I called him that because he reminded me of my own grandfather, who, the older he got, the more confident he became about. And once he reached that point, he wasn't looking for agreement nor consent. What he was looking to do is to promote consistency. And so we have this kind of erratic form of blackness today. Erratic in the sense that we can't really say with great clarity, what are we really looking for? What do we really want? We're grieving, many of us, because we thought that we would not have to do a repeat of Donald Trump. Many of us are hurt because the post-racial mantra that was raised after the 2008 election, when Barack Obama was elected, we thought that at least this notion of the first, or what I will call white tokenism, had passed. What we missed was two competing messages that were addressing a similar issue. Some say that the president failed to withdraw from the election soon enough to allow the vice president to really get her legs. You could have given her a year. It wasn't going to change anything. And the reason it wasn't going to change anything is twofold. One, she had a message that didn't really get lifted up, but once it was uttered, it made folks nervous. The other part was that there is a concern about not only who goes into the White House, but who goes with them to the White House. So you have, as we would argue, a black woman married to a white Jewish man. We've seen that experiment before. When they tried to run Joe Lieberman, that liberal practice didn't work. So the white imagery that precedes actually Dr. King's emergence is always concerned about not only who's in it, but who's attached to who's in it. So Donald Trump doesn't come back for who he is. He comes back for who's attached to him and what they can get. And let's be clear that what has been stoked is what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing told us about when she lost her tenured position at Howard and raised the concern about white racial paranoia. We don't want paranoia, we want parity. The reason there's white racial paranoia is because everybody's clear that you can change a lot of things, but you can't change science. Genetics undermine that argument every day. When Frances Cress Welsing taught us about dominant versus recessive genes, and an issue where a country had always hated this notion of race mixing. Post-Loving versus Virginia. White folks have had a problem. What they were afraid of is that their definition of race would limit them to the reality that by the time we got to 2040 or 2050, the country would be absolutely non-white majority. So what did they do? They create this spurious, tragic imagery that instead of talking about bodily autonomy, the liberation of a woman's very person, they made it about abortion. They made it about abortion because they tried to say that it was communities of color that were most at risk. Let's be clear. A few years ago, when we saw white life expectancy go down, white panic went up. So in the backdrop, they needed an ambassador for their cause. We've got to fight back against the extinction of the white race. So first we have building coalition, y'all get it. And we also have to, at the same time, talked about the warning that comes to Joseph to get up and flee with Mary and the child to Egypt and stay there until the danger's over. Everybody's kind of known that if you're going to hide someplace, you got to make sure you're hiding in a place where you don't stand out. Last time I checked,
Right.
when I read Genesis, the origin story, the rivers that are identified by where the Garden of Eden would be located, y'all ain't gonna talk back to me. I'm gonna preach on Saturday. I don't care what you say. Are still located in Africa. The Nile still runs, flows south to north. The orientation of the world is different. The Euphrates is still where it has always been. And yet, two things happened because of the need to protect white racial insecurity. One, if you go into any bookstore and you want to look at the maps, if you get a map of the Middle East, curiously, Egypt is always carved out of the continent and included in a region. The other part that's peculiar is if you look at the American Community Survey for 2024, the responsibility of the census is to kind of keep track of what's going on in households. And if you look at it, I was looking at it the other day, after you identify how many people in the household, you identify their name, then they ask this question for person one, identify race. And when you get to the box that says white, there's some references to help you understand what is and what ain't white. It was curious to me. It said Italian, that made sense. Italians have always considered themselves, kind of white. Listen. If you fail geography, don't worry about it. We'll help you out. But the heel of the boot.
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, sir.
When there was trade, tell your neighbor they were trading. Italian, German, Irish, English. So far, so good, right? And then, curiously, Lebanese, Egyptian. And then after that, they just put comma and settle. Why now selectively include that which is not white as part of the definition of whiteness? It is to destabilize our understanding of who we are. Why? Because why would you want to claim Egyptian as white? Ask your neighbor, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't
All you got to do is spend some time there and understand that located there is the ongoing representation of the genius of being African.
Yes.
In the desert, Haramaki, we call the Sphinx, keeps watch over the horizon. The pyramids still ain't figured out how, in terms of their geometric precision and perfection, were built to be such massive presentation of a certain kind of thing, but not just in terms of how they are built, but how they're oriented, aligned with the stars. Because in the belief of the African, as above, so below. That then informs why Jesus, taken to Egypt, when approached by his disciples, who presented him with this query. They wanted to have a Sunday school lesson. Teach us to pray like John teaches his disciples. Jesus, for the time he had spent in Egypt, was informed by what he had learned. Says, when you pray, pray, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done as above, so below. Y'all ain't talking to me. And so even their Lord's Prayer is the white of African Jesus. Now, if y'all go out to the streets and y'all in mixed company and you tell these white folk I told you that, I'm going to deny it. I start there because orientation matters. Your frame of reference guides everything that you will do. That's why Dr. King was such a curious creature in his time. When I went to law school as part of my midlife crisis after Freddie Gray died from the injuries he sustained at the hands of the Baltimore City Police Department, which will be coming up on the 10-year anniversary in a few weeks. Right. When I found myself having taken the bar, that my first bar score didn't meet Maryland standards, but it met Alabama. So I applied for admission to Alabama. You can ask me later, why would you do that? But because I was going to practice federal law just requires, depending on where you're practicing, that you be admitted to a state. So I said, I'll get admitted to Alabama. In the middle of COVID, I had to go down to Alabama and meet with the Committee on Character and Fitness in person, and they didn't care that it was a pandemic. I actually got on an airplane. It felt like a private jet because it was me in the group. When I walked out, I recognized what I had missed going in. That right across the street from the Alabama Bar Association, if you look slightly to the left and up the hill, there's a little red brick church on the corner. And one of the corners is Dexter Avenue. That red church sits in the shadows of the Alabama State Capitol. The dome of the Capitol, just right up some steps a few feet away. It became clear to me that this orientation was a recognition not about size, but about power. And we get them confused. We assume that in order to demonstrate that you have power, you must have a certain size. And so for them, size matters. Y'all ain't gonna talk to me. Francis Cress-Welsing says that their preoccupation with the phallic symbol has now put a premium on protecting white male ego fragility as the beginning point of any kind of political conversation. So who was going to represent this psychic disturbance in the minds of mediocre white men who walk around and say, if I'm not where I think I should be, it must be because somebody else is getting a favor at my expense. And so what we're dealing with is cultural trauma, where we have a bunch of white men walking free without a therapy plan or a therapist. And they practice their insecurity on the rest of us. So when we look at the results of the last election, there's no white man in America that was going to be disappointed that Donald Trump won. And you actually have some curious black people on TV saying, I didn't vote for him, but I'm glad he won. Now, this isn't about popularity, it's about policy. What was the distinction? Donald Trump said, I've got something in common with black people. A mugshot. That's what he said. Yeah. Donald Trump talked about, and this part wasn't too far, but he did say that, the mood of the Democratic Party has been to count on and to take advantage of black folk. Black women, 92%. Black men, 80%. For the vice president, this notion that somehow or other there's this mass exodus of people running after white insanity ain't true. That's right. This issue of immigration, folks from the southern border coming in to take black jobs, he wasn't talking about in a current sense, he was actually making a historical reference. The jobs that they were coming in to take from the southern border were to replace the labor force that was taken after the Civil War. They still mad. Let me give you the trajectory of why we are where we are so that we understand that this is not some aberration. In 1857, in a little courthouse that sits today in the shadows of the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Chief Justice Roger Taney issued a decision known to the world as the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision. You remember the story? Dred Scott had been held captive, transferred ownership. New owner took him to Illinois. Illinois was a free state. He's liberated. They moved back to Missouri. It's where he's told, you don't have freedom here. And then, of course, we have the case. And what that case came down to was not whether or not slavery was legal. The issue was whether or not Dred Scott was a citizen under the law to be able to raise the issue in court in the first place. We know what Roger said. White people, black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. Civil War happens. September of 1862, Abraham Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation. It's to take effect on New Year's Day, 1863. New Year's Eve that year, black people gathered in religious form to keep watch. Watch night for us is a reenactment of the anticipation of our liberation. Curiously, though, Lincoln liberated the slaves, the African captives, in states that were in rebellion. He had no legal authority to do it. He did not make the declaration apply to the border states. I'm coming to your house now. So Maryland was not impacted. So you have this curious blend, some free, some slave in Maryland. And one of the reasons why Maryland did not go with the South was because by that time, the national headquarters for the nation was Washington, D.C. Right. And so they needed to go with the closest army. Otherwise, they would find themselves in difficult straits. Civil War ends. Tell your neighbor the North won. I need you to say it so that you don't seem to be confused when they ask who won the war. So when the North wins the war, the conditions upon which the Southern states could return to be a part of the United States was they had to ratify the post-Civil War amendments. 13th Amendment, imperfect, but it got rid of slavery, except in instances of punishment for crime. 14th Amendment actually applied the issues of due process and equal protection under the law and birthright citizenship. It applied to the states. Now I'm gonna stop there because the 15th Amendment comes up, but that's a little later. But the 14th Amendment is the target. The 14th Amendment becomes the framework by which the work of civil rights litigation would come up years later. Now, also coming out of the Civil War was the legislation that came up that created the Freedmen's Bureau, created the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the Ku Klux Klan Act, if you've ever heard it, where 1983, it's a statute, right, that applies to what we do in police misconduct cases. But there was also Section 1981, which says that if there is interference with your ability to contract on the basis of race, you have a cause under federal law. So if you were a Black business person and they were impeding your ability to do that business and they were mistreating you because you're Black, that is actually a violation of federal law. Now, the way you enforce it is you got to have some mechanism to hold the state accountable. That's why the 14th Amendment matters. So we get through that, and then there's the election of 1876. I'll tell you where we are. The election of 1876, they couldn't determine who was going to be the winner. And so they came up with a compromise in 1877 that the yield would be, one would be president if they agreed to remove the federal troops from the South who had been in the South to enforce the application of federal law that was created after the Civil War. They pulled federal troops out of the South. We then see the emergence of Jim Crow. We then see the circumstances that lead to Plessy versus Ferguson, the separate but equal doctrine. The KKK, the lynchings go way up. White terrorism goes public. And that becomes the status quo in America until Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. When Brown v. Board, it did that in public accommodations by way of using education is the mechanism by which we find that the state cannot arbitrarily mistreat us as a result of our race. Since 1954, and there are two Brown versus Board of Education. The first is one that finds the separate but equal is unconstitutional. Then they had to come back because the states were dragging their feet on the application, and that's where we get well, Thurgood Marshall's there, but what we get is with all deliberate speed. Let's talk about deliberate speed. When Dr. King wrote, "Where do we go from here? Chaos or community?" He started with, "Where's here?" A lot of times we start with a destination, but we never figure out what's our location. And GPS ain't gonna help you figure out what's going on with race relations in this country. Then Johnson, when he was president, created a society. 64, Voting Rights Act of 65. There was an Economic Opportunity Act of 65 that established Medicare and Medicaid, the Job Corps. You had the Fair Housing Act in 1968. that extended the reach. You had the establishment of the food stamp program to address poverty. It was really an anti-poverty to address the economic reality. The reason there's an assault on all of that, do know that he's coming after social safety net. He's coming after education funding. How many of you have heard the term school choice? You've heard it? How many of you have heard it before? All right, let me tell you where it comes from. Because see, we hear it and it's being proposed this time as if it's an opportunity for folks who are not being served by the system to go to private instruction. School choice was first raised to counter the implementation of Brown versus Board of Education. That's right. It was to allow white families the opportunity to get public money to take white kids to private institutions where they did not have to deal with what was changing at the same time in 1968. That's when you get the Black Studies movement kicking off at San Francisco State College. And so what I want to scare you about Monday it's not just that he's coming back. He's coming back with some friends. Stephen Miller's his policy guy. Curiously, Duke trained of Jewish ancestry, running the policy shop. That's a whole other conversation for another day. Elon Musk is going to have his way. Let me tell you why. Elon Musk wrote a check for $250 million and didn't blink. You know why? Because Elon Musk's compensation in August was $46 billion. He got a whole lot of money thrown around. What is he after? He's after protecting his economic interests. The definition of power has a peculiar spelling to it. It's M-O-N-E-Y.
That's right.
It's land dominance. And so the reason you get the land barons, and I believe that Joe Biden told the truth, albeit a little late, but okay. 1% control more than 50% of the wealth of the country. Racial wealth gap got wider during COVID. And they keep saying, well, the poverty rate's going down. Well, that's a relative reference to the economic realities. You cannot leave a job in your will. So while they got you impressed by where you work, they're worrying about what they own. That's right. So here's what we got to do real quick, and I'm getting out of your way. The insanity has already jumped out. We can't, we act like we can't pay attention. They say, oh, it's going to be too cold to stand out on Monday at the mall. How many of you went to the inauguration in January of 2009? Y'all remember how cold it was? You had warmers in your gloves, warmers in your boots. You had warmers in your pocket. You was standing there, and it was wall to wall or mall to mall. People. This guy's impressed by perception. Yeah. Well, nobody coming to that. And it was going to be cold, too. They'd have been sitting out there on the steps of the Capitol by themselves. So what does he do? He stages an image. The inauguration is now going to be in the rotunda of the Capitol. Max seat, no, 200. Not 2,000. Any of y'all been to the Capitol? The rotunda ain't that big. So by the time they set up the staging and all that's got to be there, it's going to be a small crowd. And then he's going to go to Capital One Arena that holds 20,000 people, and they're going to hold up their, their MAGA this and their MAGA that, and he's going to walk away with this perception that he's got this mandate, and then the next day he's going to start deporting people. And oh, by the way, don't let them distract you about how they deporting people. They deporting African people too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. That's right.
And then he's going to begin the process with the budget. Now I'll ask you a question I asked it to my students. Kevin sat in one of my classes one time. I think I may have asked this class as well. Why would a multi-millionaire, at least on paper, take a job with the government that pays $450,000 a year and requires you to live in public housing? Y'all do know that the residents of the White House ain't that big. That's public housing. Why would he take that job? Access to the budget. In 4 years, Donald Trump will be able to direct almost $20 trillion of public resources. Control the most lethal military on the planet, be erratic enough to make folks afraid that he will remember the code to the silver briefcase that goes with it. And he bring it for winning. Listen that he tell your neighbor that's a lie. Mm-hmm. Hegseth, unqualified. We can go on down the list. Christy Noem, unqualified. Herschel gonna be the ambassador. Does he even know the word? The person going in to head up HUD, brother. Watch what happens. Because what he's doing is he's putting his people in place to help direct the federal money. So here's where I'll leave it. Because Dr. King said, look, we are battling 3 great evils. Materialism. Allowed for the benefit of manifest destiny in the seizing of native land to be able to turn it over to white interests. That's how many of you know white people didn't get to be wealthy because they smart? Right. That's not genius. But here's where I'll leave it. How many of y'all play Monopoly? I heard some oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Raise your hands if you play Monopoly. And how many of you play Monopoly is a game that's built on the capacity to control land.
Yes. Yes.
Now, instead of playing the game, First thing a lot of folks do is they get into debates about which piece they're going to play with. Do I get the cannon? Do I get the boat? Do I get the dog? The boot? Nobody wants the thimble because we don't know what it is. We don't know. We can say, I don't want that thing. Yeah, whatever. And then we get an initial distribution of money. And then you start rolling the dice. As soon as you leave go, you come up on them little purple properties. You call them the hood. If you understand the layout of the game, as you move around the board, the property values go up. Now, your first opportunity to dominate with the initial distribution is right there as soon as you leave go. Many of us, what we'll do is we'll try to survive trespassing until we get past go and collect $200. And so they condition us to the $200 mindset. Tell your neighbor that's payday. They say we want a check. They want the land. And so we'll skip over the available properties in the hood. And we'll say, well, let me land on chance. Well, let's talk about chance. Isn't it curious? It's curious to me that one of the cards you always want in chance is a get out of jail free card. And guess what you go to jail for? Trespassing and not being able to pay what's due. Or you land on community checks. I need help with my light bill. You can pay the electric company a certain amount of money, and those cards have value. So you go all the way around, you skip, jail and all the rest of that kind of stuff. You come down that back street, that one. Every city in America has one of them streets. It is curious to me that it's interesting that when you find yourself in a position to own land on that street, you're going to be met with resistance. Now, I'm not asking how you feel about what's going on the land. I'm just going to call it like I see it. You can deal with it later. I don't particularly care because I don't have to come back and do this again. But I'm going to say what I'm going to say. Them raggedy shacks where Cheesecake Factory and those other places are across from the Renaissance Hotel. Y'all ain't talking. All of a sudden, they ain't like what's going on there. Not because they had a problem with the what, they had a problem with the food. Name for me a city where there's any major development project that is owned by a Black developer. I'll wait. So Bramble goes to court because didn't nobody want the shack. You know it's a raggedy shack when you can't keep Hooters as a tenant. So he gets it because they were looking at the aesthetic. Yes. He was looking at the economics. He gets control of the land, and now there's a fight. They want to have meetings and conversation. They even tried to put a ballot initiative out there. That's how much they are hostile toward the economic interests of wealth building for Black people, is that they will find a curious way to get folks a vote on your interest, and you went to court and got it. Monopoly. We've been tipping down this street. You know, there's certain neighborhoods you can't be in around here after a certain time. You need a pass. We can tip past the wall. Just so we exhale with some relief when we know it's some houses on Park Place and Boardwalk and we on Landing. When you turn that last corner, you start counting how many spots you got before you get to one of them, and you start looking at the die in your hands, and you trying to figure out, I don't want to roll this number. Black economic power is not a roll of the dice. It is being intentional about understanding the rules. See, many of us try to play Monopoly. We ain't ever read the rules. The most important person in Monopoly is the banker. The banker is most important in Monopoly because the banker controls the flow of money. And when the money runs out, the banker gets to develop more money. If there's an issue or dispute, the banker gets to resolve it. The banker has the most power of anybody on the board. Now, what's the largest bank in America?
No.
Say it again. The Federal Reserve Bank. The People's Bank. They can print the money. No other bank in the country can regulate the production of money like the Fed. As a matter of fact, if you got a dollar, look, just get a dollar. If you just look at it, it will say a federal note. That's what this is about. All of that other stuff that they talking about, all of that gloss, this is about controlling the flow of money. They're getting rid of the Department of Education. All of that is just saying, look, follow the tiny thing so we can do what we really want to do over here. And they deny us the ability, because what can you do with land? You can leave it to the next generation. We're land poor. And so there's land theft going on before our very eyes. And so when Dr. King started raising the fundamental issues of what you're doing with public money to advance economic interests, fighting wars on foreign lands is not just about military supremacy, it's about the control of land. Let's go back to Africa. 1896. Conflicts in Berlin. The European powers had said, well, we want to come together and we want to divide up our interests on the continent. The United States was not a direct participant. They were the mediator of any conflicts. There were two conditions by which you could control land on the continent. One, you had to have a demonstrated economic interest to make the claim. Two, you had to have the military wherewithal to defend it. Why was that necessary? Because in that land is gold. In that land is oil. In that land are some of the richest minerals that you're going to find. On that land is timber. So they need control of the land. But guess what had changed? From their earliest beginnings, they ain't good at handling land. They don't know how to feed themselves. I think y'all would help me there. Mm-hmm. Remember, they tried this farming exercise with the natives, and when they started dying from all kinds of stuff, they said, well, we need somebody to go get it. And that's how you actually created the labor mechanism. This is a labor game. The black jobs is to go back in the fields. They can't sustain themselves. Mm-hmm. The thing that Dr. King would say is y'all miss what the dream was all about. It wasn't about a kumbaya moment to stand around with black kids and white kids just to say we together. It's to make sure that we had parity.
Yeah.
Now, why do I use parity? I was talking to Diane Bell McCoy a little earlier, and you know, we got to find different words. Parity has the same roots as reparations. It's just not as offensive. Because when you use the wrong words, you trigger a kind of resistance that makes them defensive about everything. And the first thing you got to get past white people is their guilt. How many of you are tired of sitting in rooms that the first thing you got to do is apologize to these fragile white people, that the minute you raise the issue of race, they start whining and crying and slinging snot all over the place because you called them. It wasn't me that owned, it was my social. Listen, I don't care who owned it. You benefited from it. It's still benefiting from it. Where do we go from here? We got to be clear on where he is. Donald Trump has promised white people that he's going to make America great again. Y'all do know that it's not an original statement from him. It was first mentioned by Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was the last president to be inaugurated in the Capitol Rotunda.
Wow.
This ain't got nothing to do about the weather.
Wow.
And we getting hustled.
Yes.
We've been hungry.
Bamboozled all day, every day. And let me suggest to you, if we don't come up with, and I appreciate your time. I got to let you all have your day back. A lot of folks will ask, well, what are we going to do? Let me give you a bit of prescription. A couple of things that I believe Joe Biden did do well. He didn't talk about it well. He put competent judges who understand the evolution of federal law on the bench, particularly at the trial court level. We're going to have to sue to keep this administration in check. In order to sue, you have to have plaintiffs, because they need to be the ones affected by whatever the government's going to try, right? We're going to also have to be really intentional about what we call during Kwanzaa cooperative economics. Now, let me help get some of us who may suffer from our own form of trauma, where we can always criticize how Black contractors, Black business people perform, but we give white folks a pass. We gotta be real clear. No question why they support Jewish business. No one ever questions why Jewish people tend to live together. Jewish people never suffer from denial. Their morning prayer says, God, I thank you for making me a Jew. It's in the prayer book. You can go back. Thank you that I'm not a Gentile. They say it. You ought to say this out loud. God, thank you that I am Black. James said, say it like. I'm Black and I'm Black. And I don't care what shade of black you can be pecan tank. You can be, as Naeem Akbar once said, you can be light, bright, and almost white. That was Homer Plessy. He was 7'8" white. He told the conductor, I bought a first class ticket with my own money. Oh, boy, I'm black. They made him go to what the dirt car. He refused to go. And when they arrested him, that's all you got. Because if the insurer don't want to insure you anymore, they can do to you like they just did with a whole bunch of people out in California. Cancel their policy in the middle of the fire. Demand parity. Parity allows us to draw a reference to what others are getting. We want that too. Same kind of investment, same kind of access, same kind of opportunity. We demand parity. And it doesn't matter. Donald Trump is not the first wayward president. How many of you know? He's just the one that's been the biggest pain in our behind for our lifetimes, for many of us. But I remember when Ronald Reagan got elected after Jimmy Carter got ran out under similar circumstances. He had a bad economy and he had
some food left, please make it your point if you want some fruit and sandwiches or whatever that you have this opportunity. I just want to thank all of you who didn't find it robbery to get up in this morning and come out with the threat of whatever it's going to be. But like the pastor has said, you know, I just believe I'm not afraid of the next 4 years because I do have a plan and we do have dreams, and it is about generational wealth. And so how much I do see a lot of development may be happening in my neighborhoods, I am always concerned that the developers don't always have nothing but one need. So you see these big apartment buildings, but it's just one need. Yep. And so we've got to have homeowners, you know, to come and then we also need to pay attention. I mean, as we said in the drawing of our presentation, what are you going to do? We also got to pay attention to how do we get more homeowners. Yeah. But we've also got to be able to go to the people who are responsible for building and developing and doing what they're doing and asking them how many homeowners. Because it's great to say that we've had development, but that's not generational wealth if it belongs to a developer who is of a singular mind. Now, not Black, because we haven't had that option and that luck. But one of the things that I did like in closing is when you are on the monopoly board and you make that right, you're in my neighborhood. And maybe you need to put a hotel there. Maybe you need to put a house there. And maybe you need to put houses in that poor neighborhood. That's right. Because in that neighborhood, then we'll start matching up to Park Place. That's right. Because they can have the rolling park, which is not too far from where I live. They can have the rolling park and all this and that. But I know they're paying a lot of money to heat it. And they're paying a lot of money to cut the grass. And they're paying a lot of money. But when you come down on Park Heights, where we know where we are, how many places do we own? How many institutions do we support? And the institutions that are out there to do what they're supposed to be doing, how many of us are addressing what they're not doing? Because we got a lot of beautiful organizations out here. We got down in City Hall of $1.6 billion that is going to be handled by this administration. And I don't know what type of program and projects you have. I know as Doc Cheatham does every single day. He just want to make sure people got grocery stores just to eat. Yeah. How hard is that to be perceived? And now the best thing that the governor could say, and he withdrew on his comment, is that he felt the only way to get more grocery stores liquor into your neighborhood. And yet he now has backed up because of the pressure from some people in this room, including myself. Probably never get a job with them, but it's how it'll be. But when you sit back, more than anything else, look in the mirror every day when you get up. And when you look in the mirror every day when you get up, you're not looking at yourself. You're looking at what is the future. And how do you address it moving forward? Thank you for coming. Hang around, get something to eat. Say hello. I'm going to let the pastor shut it down before he goes because this is his house.
Well, thank you all for coming. Give our speaker another hand. Sure. Left, help us get some of the tables back in there. On Monday, we're having a blackout here. So if you have a nonprofit that you work with as an adult, we're going to be meeting as adults upstairs, figuring out how we can better partner and unify together. And the classrooms on the bottom of the floor will be freedom schools. So if you have young folks from the age of 3 up until 18, we'll have classes for them to participate. Monday starting at 3 o'clock, free food, feel free to come by. And then second, a little self-promotion. If you're interested, I have copies of my book, Politically Preaching. That's right. Why politics are local to the Black church. If you'd like to get a copy, you can see me afterwards. I will hook you up.
We're going to pray out.
And then we'll pray. You're welcome to join us any Sunday. So congratulations, brother. Yes. We thank God for this time of sharing. We thank God for the wisdom that has been given to us through God's servant. pray that those who have benefited and who have been able to hear this message may not mishandle it as they leave this place. That they will be responsible for sharing the message and doing the work. Until we meet again, may the peace of the God who watches over us go with us all.
There are trash cans around. You can grab your plates and help out and stuff like that so we can get out of here. They're on your table. On your table, they are Dr. Martin Luther King pictures. That is a gift for